Okay. So this is a panel about entrepreneurship, primarily about entrepreneurship, but we'll have other things to say, I'm sure, as we go through it. But I wanted to bring in people who had non-traditional career paths in music, people who started out studying music and have done other things, and people who do clarinet things as their passion, but maybe not their full-time job. But they stay connected to music. And we have panelists from all of those different backgrounds, be it composition. Mike, I don't know, we can call you a journeyman of sorts. We have a public school teacher in Rongbing. I work in nonprofit, and I'm a private clarinet teacher. And Cameron is also a journeyman of sorts, an artist, publisher, salesperson, all those different things, and also a musician. So we have many different perspectives, and we are live on Facebook. So if you're here in the chat and you have questions as we go through this conversation, please feel free to type them in the chat and we'll address them. I want to start and give you each about 2 minutes to just sort of tell the world who you are and a little bit of how you got to what you do now as a musician or otherwise. Let's start with Rongbing.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Rongbing, and I'm a public school teacher. I'm currently teaching in the Pioneer Valley Chinese Immersion Charter School. I'm doing mostly general music, elementary students, K through 5, and this is the start of my second year of teaching. I'm really excited about it. And it's definitely not something I imagined myself doing when I first graduated. Because I went down the path of studying clarinet performance at UMass, and then alongside with that, I also studied music education. So, and I graduated at a kind of funny time during the COVID year. So I graduated at 2021. During that time, there's not a lot of job openings. And that's where kind of my music education background just kind of come into place and get me the first job that I'm working on right now. So it's definitely quite interesting. And the question a lot of people do ask me is, well, now you're working as a public school teacher. Do you get time to play, or do you play outside? The answer is yes. I do play in local orchestra and also band on the side, maybe sometime during weeknights or even weekends. And I do performances here and there, also chamber performances as well. So yeah, you can. You do different things, kind of balance them out. But it's hard. So yeah, that's kind of a brief story about me. And if you have any questions, happy to talk about it.
Cameron.
All right. Hey, folks, I'm Cameron of Camco. Easy to remember, easy to spell. I held off on reality as long as possible as far as getting a job in music is concerned. Did the bachelor's in music performance, did the master's degree in music performance, and I'm in my last year of the program and thinking, well, gosh, I don't know if I really want to do the orchestral gig. I don't think I'm cut out for those auditions, and just sort of have this big question mark on what the career is going to look like thereafter. And it was luck, fate, accident that one of the professors in the conservatory in Lynn, may he rest in peace. This is Eric Vanderveer Varner, a bassoon professor who tragically passed not too long ago. He, in addition to being a consummate professional in performing and teaching bassoon, also ran a sheet music business for bassoon and oboe, sort of double reeds. And I thought, well, gosh, that's quite the niche. Maybe I could do something like that for clarinet, because frankly, shopping for sheet music online didn't satisfy me personally. I couldn't really find all the information I wanted. Maybe you couldn't get things very reliably either, because a lot of it comes from overseas, right? So it kind of just all aligned for me to stumble into this new project for myself to solve a problem that I had been experiencing. And I opened my doors in January of 2020. Great time for small business, right? So it was a bit tough at the start, but I've seen slow and steady growth, and I've even kind of started into publishing as well, because I've realized, well, gosh, there's a lot of folks who have things to say that just aren't in print yet. So I've kind of expanded, not just as a bookstore, but also kind of helping things get into print and art as well, which is I don't like to start with that. I kind of like people to stumble into that. Maybe they find that little corner of my website. I've got stickers and handmade art that kind of lets me flex my creative muscles, as it were. So that's what I'm up to.
I mean, I feel like we know Mike, but Mike.
I'm Michael. Next. No, I'm Michael, and I, like a lot of people, you graduate into the real world. I just actually wrote a blog post. Somebody wrote me a question about this about grad school, and I literally, boom, hit post, and then I got the email that, oh crap, I need to join this. Anyway, like everybody, you kind of graduate and look at well, in my case, you look at the phone. And you're sort of wondering when that's going to ring, and you don't have the safety net, if you will, of school and the rigor of school and the how all of the scheduling is done for you. You have to kind of like adult for yourself. So I I moved to New York in the summer of 1994, and it was also a recession. It was also not an easy time for music, though it was a different time, and in some ways it was better, and in some ways it was not as good. And you make your way. And the one thing that I am glad that I did is that I said yes to everything and figured it out. There's a lot of self-doubt that you're taught in school. There's a lot, well, it's not self-doubt, but it's a lot of self-assessment. You're like, oh God, all of the things that are wrong with me as a clarinet player, that's what I'm there to figure out, right? And then you need to pivot when you get into the real world, which is like all of the things that you do well, because that's the things that people pay you to do. So you figure out what those things are, and they're not always music, and that's okay. I am, another thing that I'll say is, there's an expectation that you pick one thing that you get to do. You go to college for that thing, and then you go to grad school for that very specific thing, and then you do that thing or you sell out. And that is bull. You can double major in life. You can triple major in life. You can do as many of the things as you want to do, and it can contribute to a portfolio of a really robust, interesting, textured life. And I think that's where I'm trying to live. So I do a lot of things. A lot of people who know me for one of those things, but I do a lot of things. And I think that my life is rich as a result of it. So I think if there was one thing I wanted to leave anybody with on my epitaph, it would be like, say yes, figure it out, and don't worry about picking one thing. You don't have to pick one lane.
Honestly,
Mic drop. All right.
Skills, job skills, and what kinds of things do you think, panelists, do you think are important to pick up along the way, and what do you think is necessary?
I think that I wouldn't say that it necessary for musicians and transferable to the world is I think something is another pivot to that question. It's like the things that you learn in music school, the things that you learn as a musician in school are very transferable. And you don't necessarily think of performing, standing on a stage and performing as, how does that work in business, for example? I talk to a lot of parents who are sending their kids to Interlochen for high school, and they're like, oh my God, they're specializing so early. What if they don't succeed? And I tell them this. I say, like, if you're able to get up on a stage and have a memory slip and manage it and be able to perform, and you have the poise to be able to do that, that person in a boardroom, in a conference room with a bunch of people that you're talking to is no problem. And I know people like lose their minds having to give wedding toasts. I would never have a problem giving a wedding toast and I would imagine most of the people here who have gone through school and have stood up on a stage would have no problem with that, because that's just kind of how we're trained. This is a poise that you have that is so transferable, and the ability to maintain that poise when everything around you is going to crap is a really useful transferable skill. But then the other answer to your question briefly is you need to learn how to improvise. And that's what happens when you have a memory slip, is you are improvising, you are figuring it out. You don't get to leave the stage. And that's a skill that is so useful in life, right? Because, you plan for the best, and you have to prepare for the worst, or everything in between. So improvising is one of those skills that we aren't necessarily taught as clarinet players, though you can learn it in school, but it's one of those things that I think is super, super valuable for you to really lean into when you're out in the real world.
That is really wonderful. Just kind of going off that too. When you mentioned, standing on stage and performing, it reminded me back like a couple years ago when I have to like organize my own recitals, right? Like that organizing event skills, that's when it really comes into place. You have to figure out your poster, you have to be a designer. So, and you have to, figure out a timeline and send out invites. So a lot of different aspects really come into place and help you become a better like event organizer and really know how to manage like multitasking at the same time. And also, besides that, I was going to say, being a musician also really helps you just to be calm and really know yourself like mentally and physically. Because a lot of time with practicing and performing, we feel a lot of stress, but with the skills we learned throughout the process, like it help us become, at least it helped me become a better person and help me be able to manage when I'm feeling like really under pressure. What should I do next? And another skill I just kind of thought about is also one of my personal favorite is, some of the designing skills will be really helpful along the way. I like to use Canva quite a lot, and it also helped me calm down sometimes just to draw and make a really nice designs. It's really helpful when you want to self-promote yourself, or if you have a website, you want to put something up. You don't have to hire anyone, you just kind of do it yourself. So if you know how to use those like digital tools and make them yours, is really helpful.
Speaking of design, Cameron. I mean, Cameron has an incredible eye for design and has some beautiful art. If you haven't seen it, please take a look at his website. I posted the link in the chat. I'll let you talk about some skills that you've picked up along the way. You mentioned briefly, but more on that. Please.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, frankly, anything that I do optically, visual, graphic design or just sort of artsy illustrations, sketches, drawings, is a very fortunate byproduct of just me as a person. I certainly cultivated and honed those skills during my time in college and the like, and just personally, I've always wanted to kind of hone my craft. And if you're kind of vibing with that pursuit, I'd say, as folks have said, it can be very useful. But what I actually want to, if I can have my little moment to say something about skills, it's a little simpler and a little more general than that. And this just again speaks to my personal experience, is being able to talk with people. I don't know about y'all, but as a classically trained clarinetist, I was very pleased to just be in a room by myself for as many hours a day as I could, in my own little world and in my own mind, just obsessing over this thing that I was doing. But of course, being a musician and being a functioning member of society at some point is going to involve opening that door, walking out into the world. And I want to focus again on this point, is conducting conversations with people. And maybe even in a broader sense, not being a jerk, because all of that matters a lot. You can only get so far with an email or any kind of something that's happening on a screen, but being able to actually, whether it's picking up a phone or a face-to-face spoken conversation, will do, I think, more than anything else for connecting with people, for reaching opportunities. And it feels kind of like a lost art. I don't know, depending on what decade you were born, it's like, I mean, maybe the folks growing up nowadays, it's a totally different story, for better or for worse. I'm not sure, but it just, yeah, that's something I kind of had to work on.
I think that's such a great point. I think on the other side of it, if I can just jump in, is, Cameron, it's to your point, being able to communicate. Spoken word is great. Do realize that emails can easily be, and text even more so, misread. And what you might think as, I mean, all of us are on some spectrum, right? And our ability to say what we mean, either through spoken word or written word, is on the spectrum as well. And it's really easy to be misread. Reread what you write a lot. Show it to your partner if you can. I do that all the time, just because I'm like, I think this comes off as kind of asshole-ish, and Catherine will read it and she'll say no, or often she'll say yes. And so there's filters that you need to apply. But I couldn't agree more with what you're saying about the ability to communicate and the ability and the importance of not being a jerk. A lot of us think that our talent is going to get us everywhere. I have met so many people who are infinitely talented who have no career because they're jerks, or because they just don't know how to act. I guess that's the same thing. But it's so important to understand that there's a social aspect to music that is at least as important as your ability to play. 100 people can sit down in your chair and play the notes probably, but you are the person they want because you are you. It could be your playing, but more likely than not, you're a better hang.
How many people are getting gigs because their friend would rather work with you, someone that they like to be sitting next to in the chair, right? I mean, it's
exactly. And a lot of people don't recognize that it's, of course, being able to play your part is table stakes, but everybody can play your part. Which, by the way, will get me into a whole other story about like why orchestra auditions and screens are a disaster, but I'm just not going to go there because that's not what this is about. Don't get me started.
I think that's important. That's why so many orchestras, when they do have auditions that are blind, they end up doing trials because they need to make sure that when you sit down next to your colleagues, that you are amicable and that you can play with other people. Being able to play the Mendelssohn Scherzo at 92 beats per minute with perfect articulation is great in an audition. But when you sit down next to someone, are you going to listen to them? Are you going to play to them? If you're playing second clarinet, are you going to play to the first clarinet player? Those are invaluable skills, and it goes along with being a good person and being someone who is collegial and easy to work with. When I went and did my student teaching, I thought I was an extrovert. I thought, oh man, I'm the people person. I like parties. And I realized I was so exhausted after teaching, and I couldn't figure out, is it just because I'm running around chasing after middle school kids, or is it that I'm completely mentally out? Like just puts everything into it. And then when I leave a social situation, I'm like, oh man, I need a break. I need like a real mental break. And I think what's really great about being in the era that we're in is that we talk about mental health, especially in the US. We talk about where you are mentally and when you need a break and when you need to step away for a second and just collect yourself. And that's also an important skill. Being able to say no, which is something that I have had a hard time in my life saying no, because as Mike and I talked about earlier, you say yes when you're looking for work. You say, oh yeah, I can do that. I can grab that. You start to learn what your limits are. You start to learn, oh, okay, I have so many things to do. And then you realize I got to pull back a little bit. And really, you can tell when your quality starts to drop in all of the tasks, or when you just have a complete and utter mental shutdown and you just can't, you're overstimulated and you can't focus in and work on something. I find myself in that period right around Clarinet Fest when there are 8,000 emails coming in and I have to address so many things and so many fires. And it's even worse on site, but I'm there, I'm in the moment. And then when I go to bed, I am dead. So I think that's something important too, is to learn. You learn yourself, you know yourself as you go through the process of looking for a job, for a field that fits you, something that really allows you to take the time that you need to address tasks and work and be happy in what you're doing, which is, we get one life. You're going to live your life and do something that makes you happy. Mike works many different things, plays an amazing, if you haven't listened to him, I can't believe maybe you live under a rock at this point if you've not heard Mike's videos and performances. But, Mike also flies planes. Did you know that? Mike is a pilot and he flies around the world. Yes. So there are many things that you can do, and you just need to take care of yourself. I think that is something that many of us in music have a hard time doing, because we just constantly want to make sure that we're doing what we love, but we're not taking the time to enjoy other things outside of that.
Can I just underline that again? I said it before. I want to say it again. It's like you don't have to choose. So much stress comes from saying like, oh my God. I mean, watching people try instruments at our shop, it's like they're choosing a life partner. It's a tool. It's a hammer that you play. It's like, it's not it's what you do with it and all that stuff. But also think it's like, it's a life. You don't have to make one choice in your career. You can make multiple choices. You can change your mind. And this idea of do what you love is really stressful for a lot of people. I answer so many emails from people who are like, I want to do what I love, but I can't play that well. Well, so it's not that you can't do that. You can still do what you love and put food on your table another way. It doesn't have to be what puts food in your refrigerator, playing music. And I have the pleasure and honor, and I'm just so happy that a lot of people during the pandemic came to me saying, I didn't play clarinet for 42 years, but now I have 2 extra hours in my day because I don't have to commute. And I just found my clarinet in the closet and it has 17 cracks and I want to figure out what to do. And I'm so excited to come back and playing. And then they stay in touch and they're like, I am now in a community band and I'm happier than ever. And, I've lost 20 pounds and, so anyway, I really believe that you don't have to make a single choice because those are the things that stress you out. There are a lot of yeses. I'll shut up.
I think one of the greatest things about the ICA and in the last 10 years is really the shift away from this idea that being a musician is about being an elite player and playing in an orchestra and teaching in a college. And the ICA is a community of clarinet players who are in all walks of life. We have people who are doctors and lawyers and public school teachers and people who work retail and people who just love the clarinet. And I think that is such an important shift that we made as an organization, so that we can get more people into just enjoying music and being a part. And we just had a beautiful masterclass earlier today with enthusiasts and also students. And I think seeing everyone embrace the instrument and the love of music is the greatest joy in my work with the ICA. So I appreciate everybody who comes to work for the ICA. I see Julianne is here. Julianne, our pedagogy coordinator, pedagogy committee co-chair. We have so many people who dedicate so much time and energy to making sure that we are producing content and bringing people and exposing people to different ways to learn and grow as people. First, as people, and second, as musicians, and as clarinet players, third, I think. Being a clarinet player is like the last thing. We want you to be great people. We want you to be amazing musicians and be able to communicate and work with other musicians so you can make beautiful music. Even if you're playing by yourself, it's a big joy to be able to play. And we had someone shared a video earlier of them performing with their community band, and we played that. And it's so great. Even as a professional musician, I encourage you to go out into your community and play in one of those community bands and meet the people who live by you who make music for fun, because they will really, really shape your reflections on how you approach playing as a professional. I think we all get so stuck in our heads. It's like when you come away from college at the high level, like a PhD level, and you go and teach a beginner. And you start rattling off all of this information that is really like too complicated for somebody who's a beginner. And they're just like, yeah, okay, I don't really understand what you're saying. I can't make a sound. I don't know how to put the reed on the instrument, and you have to take a step back and say, I forgot what that was like. I forgot what it was like to be a beginner, to be excited about making music. And I am thinking about all these high-minded concepts. And I only teach middle and high school students now. And it's always really a challenge to look at what they're learning and say, okay, think back 20 something 30 years ago when you were learning at this age. What did that feel like? What was the feeling that you had? And try to see what it's like for them and give a little bit more enthusiasm, but also a little bit more understanding from that perspective. I'm just rambling, I think. Let's pivot to another question. I'm curious. I want to give Mike and Cameron a bit of a time to sort of talk about their jobs within the clarinet community, specifically ear spasm and the shop that you opened up, and what that experience was like for you. And then I also want to give Cameron a chance to talk about the day-to-day work in the publishing industry and the relationships that you are building with people. And I see Kristen's jumped in here. We'll get Kristen Chambers in here as well. I would love to have her speak a little bit.
Would you like me to go first?
Yeah, sure.
My career I've been a double major. My wife calls it that. I've had the music stuff, and then I've had all of the, I've worked in advertising and marketing for years and years. And that's not actually a big jump. I think if you're in music, you're in marketing. I think your product is you. I think anything from putting together recitals and recital posters, as Rongbing was saying, it's like that's marketing, right? So I just made the difference between marketing myself and then, marketing, toothpaste. So anyway, I've worked in advertising for a long time, and I worked at Amazon, which, is a retail environment. And I drank the Kool-Aid at Amazon for a long time. But I realized more and more that after the pandemic, I really just wanted to focus on this business that it looked like it made a lot of sense with all of these people writing and asking me about learning how to play the bass clarinet again after 40 years. I was sending them to other folks. I was like, wait a minute, I could do that. And so I went ahead and we opened up the business, and we focus on bass clarinets. At least we did at first. And, since there is not a single bass clarinet only shop in the world, and since I had been doing this ear spasm channel on YouTube for like 12 years, I felt like I at least had a platform to stand on. And so we opened up the business, focusing really narrowly on something that no one else decided to focus on. Even though it existed, it was one of those things that felt like it was too niche. But it was also too niche when I started playing the bass clarinet, and there wasn't a solo repertoire for it. So why should I, so it kind of felt like an extension of that. Anyway, so this past year we went into selling clarinets. We've sold accessories forever and ever. As of January 3rd, I am retiring from Amazon. I am jumping in the deep end. I'm very excited about it, to leave corporate advertising world behind after 27 years and do ear spasm. And it's by choice. So I'm just super thrilled about that. Running a business, as Cameron knows, is a lot about, and as you know as well, it's a lot about dealing with lots of personalities. I will say, I think probably this won't be any surprise to anyone that clarinetists are a weird bunch. And a lot of them are focused on really esoteric, narrow things. And there are a lot of really bizarre questions that I field, and I'm happy to be the one that gets to answer them. I'm really glad that people write me. I'm sure they write me about different things than they would write Cameron about, and different things than they would write Kristen about. I think all of us are kind of focused on the one thing that you're also focused on, which is I love professional players. I love orchestra players. But I actually really love people who love music for a lifetime more than I love people who like music for a living. You can do music for a living, and a lot of people do, but you can have music for a lifetime where more people live. More people are enjoying music as a part of their life, but not the main focus of it. Those are the people I think that Kristen serves. I know I serve. I think Cameron serves. It's the larger community of people who are super enthusiastic about the clarinet, and that actually is. I am so delighted that ICA is focusing on those people, because that is really, I think, in a lot of ways, the future of music is going back to the way it was in Mozart's time, where everybody played, and music was something that you enjoyed and you shared with other people, and there was less of a professional class and an amateur class. And I think that we're moving toward that with all of the democracy of the internet and all of the reason that instruments are becoming more affordable, all those things. It's a wonderful time to be in music. It's a wonderful time to be entrepreneurial. Over to you, Cameron.
I'll catch that. Yes. Well, this may be like saying, water is wet, but I hope everybody knows the term amateur. Maybe it's kind of a dirty word, but if you look at the prefix ama, it's to love. It literally means someone who's doing it for the love of it. Amor, right? Amateur. I guess enthusiast may be a more PC term, and I think that's a great term. But yes. I'll tell you, I sell a lot more of the closet and the rose than I do the like crazy weird paint splatter multiphonic stuff, right? I mean, there may be one of those to every 99 rose books, and that's fine. I mean, even just look at the kind of the pyramid. How many folks are going to be those elite, right? That they're like the tiny amount, and there's way more, just a huge, bigger body of folks who are doing it for other reasons in other domains. And the other thing I'll just say on that note is also, as was spoken by Jessica, gosh, the energy coming off those people is great. I mean, I don't know if you, for people that have been to one of the in-person ICA Clarinet Fest events, you get a lot of enthusiasts coming in the doors, and they're the ones who are like barreling through, having a great time. They're kind of like uninhibited, and it's so refreshing to be on the receiving end of some of that energy. But anyway, I guess I'll get back to my office talk, because that's kind of what we're posing here question wise. Yeah, data, the simplest answer I give for what I do is I'm a facilitator, because like I said, I was frustrated as a customer in my space, and I wanted to solve some problems. So what I'm trying to solve these problems, get the stuff reliably, know what the stuff is, very, very basic things that frankly has been solved in many other areas. I mean, Amazon ships most everything to everywhere, but this is one thing that didn't seem to have been caught by that net, for example. Not to just pin on Amazon, but yeah, I really just kind of carved out a little corner where more and more folks are realizing, well, gosh, he still has the stuff, moving a physical product from A to Z. Now, that's not very exciting per se, although it can be rewarding in its own sense. But the other thing I do, besides kind of just the bookstore distribution, is publishing, because like I said, there are people who have something to say who maybe just don't have the time or the energy to do it themselves. Because although you can get pretty far with Google and doing things yourself, at a certain point there may be a need to bring in another person. And maybe this is another skill that we haven't a crucial skill we haven't touched on, is collaboration, or asking for help, or actually bringing other people into your fold. I've had to learn that lesson pretty the hard way too. Is I started this thing, I thought, I'm going to build the foundation, I'm going to build my pyramid, and it's my fortress, and like it's all going to be me, Camco. There's no other name on the cover, right? Wrong. It's, even though this is still a one man band, so to speak, I have had immense help and mentorship and guidance all along the way, and each and every day. But even the people that I work with, to get back to the publishing thing, they kind of help me, because they're not just sort of sharing their work with me, they're sharing their perspective with me. I may learn about the needs of students, because someone can say, oh, I've got this E-flat clarinet etude book. How many of those are there out there? Or my student had a volleyball accident, and now they can only use one hand, and now they're coming in for their clarinet lesson every week. Are we just going to quit, or am I going to find some way to facilitate still having lessons? Hence Mary Alice Struan's one-handed clarinet book. Is like stuff I never would even thought of, right? But I'm now kind of privy and privileged to be part of those explorations and discussions, and in some cases productions. And that's probably the most exciting part of what I do. Yeah.
We actually might be having some more content actually about the one-handed clarinet. And we're going to be doing some more content as well about plateau clarinets, because we've had a lot of interest in that for people who are enthusiasts, who are losing the facility in their fingers and are struggling to cover the holes due to arthritic pain and things like that. So I'm really excited to be able to share some of that information in the coming year in the magazine. So Rachel is working hard on those kinds of articles. Kristen, are you here? Kristen is in a library, shuffling her children back and forth to different places.
I'm here. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes,
I can.
Okay.
Kristen is an incredible musician and composer, and Actually, we are doing a commission right now with her. If you haven't seen information about it, we have an enthusiast committee commission where she is writing a work that's going to be premiered in Ireland at Clarinet Fest 2024. You can join that commission. Enthusiasts and senior citizens can join at $60 tier, and then we have a regular tier at $100. That is going until the 1st of December. So there's information on our website about that. But Kristen, I want you to talk a little bit about your clarinet journey and how you found yourself being who you are as a musician and a composer and just mentor for so many people. Like, share a little bit about that with us.
Okay, hi, I'm going to attempt a video for a short time, and I hope I don't bother people because I'm in the library and they're looking at me.
Rebel.
I have to keep an eye on my kid over there. So that is a loaded question. Let me think for a second. I started late. So I started playing the clarinet when I was almost 17. So I had a whole lot of catching up to do. And I think because I started late, it was actually a good thing for me because I dove in head first and really immersed myself in it, practiced all the time, and had crazy goals like I want to be first chair, I want to be the drum major, which happened my senior year, which was crazy, but also really cool and very satisfying. And it completely changed the trajectory of my life. I was going to be a math major and be an accountant and all this lovely math stuff. So that changed everything for me. And then I went to school for music, wanted to be a band director. I did that for a couple of years and decided I wanted to do something different. So I went to school again and got my doctorate, thinking that I wanted to do, upper academia, position in a college somewhere. And then the more I was in it, the more I realized, I think my niche is young players or, adults, something like that. Because even in my entrepreneurship class, my project was a method book for adult learners. And that it's kind of funny to look back on that because that's kind of what I ended up doing. But the composing thing came late. And it kind of came suddenly, mostly as a means to solve a problem or fill a missing hole, or a missing gap of things that were kind of needed. We need more study materials and things at sort of that middle level rather than we have all this really advanced stuff and we have lots of beginning stuff. So I wanted to kind of help fill in those gaps along with people like Paul Harris, who's one of my idols because he's a clarinetist and a composer. So it just kind of took off. And the whole reason I started to push towards that is because my kids were getting ready to start school. And I had to think to myself, if I'm teaching all these lessons at night from like 4 to 9 p.m., when am I going to see my kids? So then it kind of came to that question, like more about I need a change in my life so that I can be there for my family. And it just worked out so beautifully. I'm able to work during the days while they're in school. And then they come home, we do our activities like we're out right now. And then, when my husband gets home from work, then I can do a little bit more work if I need to. Otherwise, I just kind of save it for the daytime. So it works out really nicely for me.
I just posted both the link for Kristen's website, Clarinet Playground, and the consortium that she's running in the chat. If you're interested, we will also share those on social media. If you haven't taken a look at the finger fitness etudes, please do. They are incredible books.
This wasn't
They're
a
so-
plant. Someone just bought them. I had them on the table, ready to go in the box.
I have mine here.
They fly out the door.
The music is so approachable and so tuneful, and I haven't worked with a student who didn't find them enjoyable to play and work on, and they address so many fundamental playing issues and joys, and I just love them, and I'm really grateful to know you, Kristen, and be able to use your materials.
Can I ask a question?
Interested. Oh, sorry.
I wanted to ask you a question. It's Michael.
Okay.
Why do you think it is? I mean, you make decisions about what you write, the music you write, the style of music you write, the way you go about teaching, all of that stuff. And what do you attribute your success and I would consider you successful, but you know, I mean, all of us, we put our hands on our heads to see how tall we are. It never feels like we're tall enough. What would you attribute that to? Because it is different, and they feel different, and they sound different from just about everything else that's out there. And when you think that, oh my God, every etude book has probably ever been written has been written, and then it comes you. What do you think it is?
I am pretty convinced it comes from my vocal music background because I was a singer before I was ever an instrumentalist. And so I think everything that I write is a song. If you really look at it, it's a song. It's very song-like, it's tuneful, and it's almost like a Slumdog Millionaire kind of thing because everything comes from different aspects of my life. Everything that I've experienced and different things have influenced my music. So if you call out a name of an etude, I could be like, oh, that's because this happened in my life.
Well, you must have lived an interesting life so far because your music is so interesting and it's so great. I mean, I can't say enough. I am such a fan.
Well, I'm a fan of yours, so it works both ways.
Okay. I want to ask, Julianne, are you able to chat? I want to bring Julianne in here because, and Laura, Grantier is here also, and I want to get in some different perspectives that we haven't had yet. Obviously, Julianne being our pedagogy coordinator for the ICA, but is also, a university professor and has had many different opportunities. And I wanted to have Julianne speak from the perspective, because listen, everybody here is in different fields outside of teaching college and playing orchestrally, but that doesn't mean that we don't say that those are valuable jobs. That's far from the truth. But I want to give Julianne a chance to sort of talk about her perspective as a university professor and some of the skills that she uses on a day-to-day basis that are valuable and helped her to get where she's at.
Sorry, I lost you for a second. Give me just a minute. There we go. I had to get upstairs and get plugged in. My kids are downstairs, so I didn't want to have too much noise from the family. In terms of, I've been teaching at the college level for now 19 years. I kind of had the straight path. I did my undergraduate. I stayed an extra year. I auditioned for graduate school and they weren't taking anybody that year. And I really wanted to go to Eastman. So I was told, wait a year, there'll be space. So I took that 5th year, and having only a performance degree, I did all music education coursework that next year. And I'm basically student teaching shy of a music ed degree. Now, considering where I'm teaching, where I train music educators and players, that was probably the best spent year of my education. So went on and did my master's and doctorate. I say I did the crash course. I did it in 4 years in a summer, which was pretty fast. And then took a 1-year position, and then I got my job at Crane. So it just kind of straight through. And over the years, I've really enjoyed, I started with a very standard approach to my teaching and using all the materials I studied. But then over the years, it's been really fun to explore new things. So Kristen's books and various other etudes and things that have come into play. And it's been fun to watch my students grow from playing music of their time. And we had a charge from our dean about 4 or 5 years ago as we were coming into the women's suffrage celebration. And he said, please consider in your programming music by women for next year. And I went, I went back to my office and I looked through my files and was very dismayed to find I had a very small stack of music by women, and realized I have no etudes by women, except for Kristen's Prep Steps Before You Crutch. That was the only thing. So this was an opportunity for me to reflect a little bit on what I was using in the classroom and in my teaching. And by my researching this and exploring different things, my students started doing the same thing. And so I have some students that when they start programming, they're like, I want to play all things by women and I want to cover different countries. I had one student that her entire recital was music by women from different countries all over the world. So that was really, really interesting. But kind of back to, just teaching, and I love what I do because I get to do so many things. I get to teach, I get to play chamber music, I play in a local wind ensemble that includes my colleagues at Crane, area band directors, and select college students. I get to play in an orchestra, small regional orchestra, but again, my colleagues, local area teachers, some people come in from other areas. And so I get a good smattering of experiences along the way. So that's fun. But I might not have touched completely on your question because I lost the last bit of it, but was there anything else you wanted me to cover?
No, I think that's really great. I think it speaks to a lot of what people have been talking about, and just having the ability to improvise and to realize, like, when you are found like, oh, I have a glaring hole in my skill set, what do I need to do to address that? Be able to do it without feeling down on yourself, or, you know, with that, if it's a mistake, then you can learn to say, I made a mistake and now I'm going to change that, and be able to speak on it without embarrassment, because we all learn from mistakes and continue to grow as people and musicians and as teachers. You know, one of the most glaring things as a teacher is being in that moment and have a student ask you a question and not knowing the answer, and being able to look them in the eye and say, I don't know the answer to that right off the top of my head, but I'm going to look it up and I'll get back to you after I've had a chance to formulate my thoughts on that. And then, you know, you go and you look it up, you say yes in a different way as a teacher, and you're not coming off as, you know, you're not going to know everything. And you can't beat yourself up about that. You probably also run into a situation as a teacher where you have a student who, it just, no matter how many times you explain something, can't quite understand what you're trying to get them to do. And that happens a lot. And you have to be able to call an audible and reach out to a colleague of yours and say, hey, you know, and it could be a trumpet teacher, it could be a vocal teacher, it could be anybody, it could be a physical therapist. You know, you can ask anybody that you know to help address the issue that a student has, and you have to be a good person and have those relationships built up so that you can make those things. And I want to give Laura Grantier, our ICA secretary, a chance to talk about, she has had a really long, incredible career as a military musician, and now has pivoted outside of military music and is doing teaching. Now she's teaching collegiately. So Laura, can you talk to us a little bit about that experience of moving after your career in the military and what that was like?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And I just finished teaching a lesson, and we have studio class coming up. And so I was going to talk about Giving Tuesday to my students. And yeah, so I spent 26 years in the U.S. Navy Band in Washington, D.C. And that was really an interesting career. It was performance-based. But one of the missions of the military bands in general is education outreach. And so when the band would go out on tour, or when the band is back in Washington doing what we would call our Beltway series, we always have what we would call music in the schools. And so I always loved going out into the schools and, you know, doing a master class out on tour. I really enjoyed working with students. I always enjoyed sitting next to a student and working with them. And so what's funny is when I went to start my doctorate, I did not start my doctorate with the intent of teaching. I started my doctorate because after about 10 years in the band, I had kind of developed some bad habits. I wanted to improve as a musician. And so the Navy has education benefits. And so I decided to use those benefits to, take lessons and work towards my doctorate. And I think that's really important wherever you are in your stage of life or your stage as a musician, to always remain curious and always strive to develop yourself and your skill set. And I really feel like that, getting the doctorate really, really helped me become a better musician and become a better teacher. When I was applying for collegiate jobs outside of the Navy Band would get my foot in the door, so to speak, because of my performance background. But it was really the education outreach that I did with music in the schools through our clarinet quartet, or giving a master class at different universities when we're out on national tours, that kind of put me, gave me that little extra bump over the top. So I will say one of the biggest changes I've experienced is I now have a bigger creative voice. I think when you're in academia has the same bureaucracy as the military, not going to lie, and filling out paperwork and submitting grants, that's that's all part of it. But I do think there's a little more leeway as a collegiate teacher. Well, I would like to do a commission. I have a composer in residence this week who wrote me all of this wonderful clarinet music. We're doing a lecture recital tomorrow. He was able to speak with composition students today. We'll do the lecture recital tomorrow. I have a female composer who is writing me a piece, who wrote my ladies clarinet quartet, Voix de Femme, wrote us a piece that we premiered at Clarinet Fest in Denver. And so I feel like the creative collaboration, the sky is the limit. And that's so exciting. We can create music by female composers or composers from diverse backgrounds. It's just the collaboration and creativity. Really, you can make it what you want. I mean, you've got to write the grant and you've got to get the money. And I'm learning that. But I just feel like I can tell my students, the sky's the limit on what you want to learn and to collaborate with each other. I think I've really enjoyed the transition from a very structured environment to one that is a little more, hey, make it happen. And you have to, my university is an R1 school. So that means I'm evaluated on my research, on my teaching, and my service. And so creative research can be performances, it can be commissions, things of that nature. And really, it's kind of like, okay, I can go do a masterclass and recital here. I can premiere a new piece. We can push the boundaries of compositions for clarinet, contrabass clarinet, alto clarinet. I will say alto clarinet's my favorite. So I really, it's exciting to be in this environment where I'm like a kid in a candy store and I can just create. And my students, they see that and then they're like, well, I want to do that too. Well, can I write this? Of course you can. So it's all about the creativity and also having the support from your colleagues, your director, department chair, or whatever, to support you in these endeavors. And I have that. And yeah, I mean, I'm loving life. It's been great, but I do think the Navy Band gave me those tools, gave me that experience to be able to come into a second career. I certainly could not have, I don't think I could have done it without that experience. Also, the leadership roles I had in the Navy Band of managing students, managing people. So yeah, does that answer the question in a long-winded way?
Yeah, no, I think that's so great. It's been really fun to watch you sort of grow into your role. And as I mentioned before, Laura is our secretary on the ICA's board and has done a great job taking notes and helping spread the word. The Utah chapter of the ICA has a clarinet choir that practices and performs throughout the state. And she's been really involved in that. And it's so great to see that that community of clarinet players in Utah getting together and just making music. And Laura's a big part of that. So we really appreciate you reaching out to those people in your state.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
So I want to talk about something, and I got into trouble with this during the pandemic and it kind of got negative. So I want to try to spin this in a positive way so that we don't get too pessimistic on things. But we are by nature, in the way that society is connected to each other through Zoom right now, but also on social media. And it's very easy for students and for musicians in general to become discouraged by looking at other performances on social media and thinking, oh, I'm just not that good of a player, or I feel discouraged by, I think when I was in my master's program, somebody brought in a video of Julian Bliss when he was like, 8 years old. And they were like, check this out. And I was like, wow, okay. Of course, it's a piece that I'm working on right now. I feel real great about myself. So I want to talk about the benefits and stay away from the negativity, because we all know that social media can be really toxic and really harmful to your mental health and your progress as a musician if you are hiding in the wrong corners. But I think it's important that we acknowledge that as a musician, as an entrepreneurial musician, we have to utilize it to sort of reach the people that we want to reach and form connections with people that help us grow. And I think Kristen, if you're still there, I want to highlight Kristen's Facebook group, where her community just plays an etude together each week, and they share recordings of them working on that etude, and everybody offers, some advice or support in some ways. And I think it's a really wonderful and welcoming way to grow as a music community without hurtful commentary and toxicity. And I think I would love to have each of you sort of talk about how you utilize and kind of walk that line to sort of stay away from that.
I can jump in real quick. I'm in another quiet corner, hopefully. It is definitely tricky. I was off social media for 5 years after I left Colorado. I needed a break from everything. So when I came back on, I was like, I'm only going to do music. So all of my friends are music. It's just music. So I kind of treat it like another outlet for making connections with musicians, teachers, performers, everybody, composers. And then, there were some communities, and of course, like you said, there's good and bad. And I think it's really hard to let go of the bad depending on how your brain works. So my brain goes right to the bad and it's like, it's all bad. But I've said to myself, okay, let's see if I can make something good and just have extremely, extremely clear expectations of the group. Like, this is a positive place. I wanted it to feel like studio class, because that's the thing I probably miss the most about being in college is studio class, where we play for each other and it's just like a little party. At least it was for me. I'm sure other studios are more competitive, but all the studios that I was in, it was just really fun and we had a lot of fun. So that's what I missed. And I wanted to kind of create that environment again. And I think we've done a pretty good job of it. And I think in the pandemic, it was very needed. I think now people are busy again, so it's hard to know how long it will survive, but I like that it's there and people can pop in and out whenever they want.
I want to, speaking to the positivity of social media and the internet and sharing. Hey, nice crowd there. Speak to something that I've observed, that I'm trying to take on myself, that I was kind of shocked at how folks maybe in let's just say the ages 12 to 24, but actually really any decade, really, it's more speaking today, will just share what they're practicing. Because up to that point, I would die before I put up a clip, an audio clip or video for that matter, of something that wasn't polished. It's got to be the finished audition tape or bust, right? And all the commercial recordings that I've been listening to were that. They were commercially produced recordings. They were polished. They were edited. Every little note had been fixed or shifted or whatever the case had been for, getting that perfect result. So this kind of just blew open the doors on that, right? And granted, I don't necessarily take a personal interest in watching the sheer bulk of it, actually consuming it, but I applaud people who are willing to put themselves out there as a work in progress, because that speaks to a certain kind of integrity maybe kind of pulls off the magic veil of what otherwise is just this delusion of things being a perfect finished product at all times. So that's one aspect of digital kind of social environments that I've actually taken an appreciation to, even if I'm still struggling to do it myself.
Yeah, I think it was before the pandemic, but I think there was a lot of, 100 days of practice going around, and students were really committing to sharing a video, regardless of how good or bad it was, on social media for everybody to see, hey, I'm working on myself, I'm getting things done. It's a work in progress. And I think even some really famous musicians, Hilary Hahn still does those 100 days of practice. She's a pretty famous violinist, and it's amazing to see progress over time. And I was involved with one of the schools here in the Columbus area in Ohio. We did that during the pandemic, and it was the way that I kept in touch with my students and had accountability. And I think that's one of the shining spots on social media. Julianne, can you talk about how to help like students who are younger, how to help them navigate sort of these kinds of relationships with social media, and also recordings, and what you do in a studio class setting to sort of manage their expectations of progress and where they're going long term, how they set those goals for themselves, and try not to, compare to, as Cameron was talking about, these perfect recordings of pieces that we're all familiar with that just sound so amazing. You sit down to play it and you're like, there's no way I can sound like that. How do you manage those kinds of conversations and thoughts that they're having as students?
Oh yeah, great topic. A lot of my students, they'll come in, they'll have listened to X recording of this great artist, and that's their goal. And we have the conversation that how many times did that artist learn, perform, practice that piece before they laid down the recording, and how many splices are there? And that it wasn't perfect in the first take. Maybe some people, but most people, there's splices and things in there. And so we talk about how the tempo indications by the composers are ceilings, and that maybe your first time around the track, you're not going to go 126. Maybe you're going to go 116, 118, maybe less. And be okay with that. But coming up with a strategy, a plan from your goal, backing that up to the beginning of where you are. And sometimes we'll discuss that over the course of several months. We'll pick, okay, your jury performance is here. Where do you want to be halfway, and where are you now? And we talk about where we need to get to at certain points to set goals, and then be okay with baby steps, small chunks over. I had a graduate student just yesterday doing her oral and talking about we just jump in and play it through and just hope it'll stick. And we can't do that. And so it's how do we absorb, how do we practice for absorption? And that varies from person to person. You may hear your classmate in there whizzing through a whole page in a practice session, and you mastered 8 bars. That's your pace. And you know what? Slow and steady. The slow and steady will win the race, as long as you retain session to session. Maybe that person that sounded like they got the whole page, they came back the next day and it was exactly the same problems. And so we talk about having confidence in your preparation that will help you with that confidence when you stand up to perform. And a lot of the students I've been really impressed have created little Instagram practice logs, and they'll only invite a small assortment of people to join them, and they give each other comments. And they'll be, this is my etude I'm working on this week, or I'm going to play down my scales, or this is part of my solo that I worked on today. And they share that, and I'll go on and give them some feedback, or we'll talk about it in the lesson. But I feel like that's been a real positive usage of that, and that them having the bravery to record and put it out there at such a young age. As Cameron said, I wouldn't have done that as a college student. I'd sit there and do take after take after take for my Aspen recording or whatever it was, until it was absolutely perfect. And so yeah, I really applaud these students and these players that do this, that put it out there. This is where I am, and I know I need to go to this next level, but this is where I am today. And so hopefully that gets the conversation going and addresses the topics.
if I can jump in, I think that the internet and social media in particular emphasizes some of the negative parts of, obviously, of human nature. One of them is competition, right? This whole idea of FOMO is about I got to do something and you didn't, or what have I done that you haven't, or what have I accomplished that you'll never accomplish, and and it goes from there. And I think that that exacerbates a problem that is part of um, high school education and even middle school education, which is this idea of all state and competitions. And the idea that music is a zero-sum game. In order for me to win, you have to lose. And I think that's a really an important muscle to relax and even if possible unlearn and stop using, because music is not a sport, and oftentimes we treat it like a sport. And in high school, people who are musically inclined, who may not necessarily be able to play football, use music as the substitute for that, for a sport, for the ability to win, to be better, to be best. And and I think what I like is that there is this culture of process. I know that Kristen's not here anymore, but that is really what she's fostering, is this idea of this is me today, and everyone else is is clapping to that person. And I think that's what's so great about what she does, and I think that's really unique about the community that she's built. And Michelle Anderson does the same thing. And it's about where you're at, but a lot of students, certainly a lot of emails that I'm sure a lot of us field are about, I'm not as good as this person. Or again, another one that I fielded today from somebody, I feel like Dear Abby sometimes, is that like, all of my friends are auditioning for these programs and I'm not good enough to do that. And where should I go? And what's going to happen to me? It's like, you should be looking the absolute opposite direction, which is inside rather than outside. Look inward and figure out what you want to do. Maybe they want to be in an orchestra. Maybe you don't. It doesn't really, at any rate, the main point of it though, is that music is not a competitive sport. And we reinforce that in high school, and I think we need to absolutely unwind that in college. And I know you do that, and I know a lot of good teachers do that. There is still an element for those who are auditioning that there is a winner and everyone else loses, but there are very, very few zero-sum opportunities in music. And in fact, if you treat them like zero-sum opportunities, you will wind up losing more than you will wind up winning, because everyone will hate you.
Whoa. No. It's
Sorry, was that a little
completely
intense?
a little intense. No. It's really good advice. And honestly, the US is different in the way that we approach teaching music and teaching children. In many countries in Asia, it's an after school thing, and they do it for, if you've ever heard any wind ensemble or ensemble from like clarinet ensemble from Japan, they spend hours and hours together after school is over. And they're making music and loving it, and they're really clean and really great musicians. But it's not something that they're doing as part of a curriculum. And I think that's one of the things that's a little bit different in the way that we do it. And we kind of run into that issue when you're in high school and you have a guidance counselor. Maybe it's different now. I graduated high school 21 years ago, so it's probably very different. I know. I just turned 40 like 3 days ago. Give me a break. You go in and they're like, what do you want to study? For me, they were like, do you want to go to college, or do you want to go into, I don't know, technical school? And I was like, well, I want to go to college and I want to be a band director and I want to study music. And they were like, whoa, okay, that's a very specific thing. And then you go there and you immediately start taking coursework that's like hyper focused on all of these things. And, sometimes it's great. And sometimes students really excel. And sometimes they realize after 2 years of study that they don't want to do that. And that's okay. I think it's important for us to sort of say that to students who are pursuing music. It's okay to pivot and do something different. It's okay to improvise, as Mike said, and find where you want to be. When I was getting my doctorate at Michigan State, 4th year, and I went through a bunch of different teachers because Caroline Hardig left to go to OSU, and I was really confused about what was going on. And then I had an extra year with an interim, and then I decided to stay an extra year, and I did a fellowship with the residential college in the arts and humanities. And that school, ARCA, as they called it at Michigan State, all of those bachelor students were designing their own degree programs. It was amazing. There were people who were studying coding and trombone, and people who were studying art and creative writing, and infusing those different things together to create something that was unique to their skill set, that was passionate for them. And I got to work with those kids, and I was like, wow, now that is a way to approach life and education and learning. And I think not every degree program can be built like that, but that doesn't mean that you can't, pursue those other items and make yourself, market yourself, and find a spot for yourself, entrepreneurial wise, within the clarinet or the music industry. There are many, many different outlets for us, be it in teaching public schools or collegiate teaching, playing orchestrally, playing chamber music, working in a nonprofit setting, running your own business, being a marketing person. There are so many different ways that you can find a spot. And I think that's the main voice of this panel is bringing in all these different perspectives to show you that music is something that if you love and you want to pursue, there's so many ways that you can stay connected to it. And we hope that, the ICA helps you to find that spot and to pursue it. We have to sort of pivot away from this panel, but I know there's so many different questions. If you have questions that we didn't answer during the panel today, I would love to encourage you to email me. This is a topic that is always important to discuss, but I think we always get too technical about what do I need to do and how do I broaden my skill set so that I'm more marketable in the job field. We're not talking about that. Mike pretty much started us off right on the right plane of like, life is an experience. You should be enjoying life, and music enhances your life. Bottom line, it enhances your life. It makes it more enjoyable. And we can all share in that joy together.